The package arrived at the ranch covered in so much dust and grime that Tucker Morgan almost threw it away, with the other debris cluttering the porch of his inherited property in Bonanza, Colorado. It was late summer in 1879, and he had been working since dawn repairing fences on land his uncle had left him when consumption took the old man 6 months prior. Tucker was 26 years old, sun-weathered and solitary, the kind of man who preferred the company of horses to people after spending 5 years drifting from ranch to ranch across Wyoming and Montana. He wiped the sweat from his brow and examined the bundle more closely, noticing it bore his name in faded ink, alongside an address he had not lived at for half a decade. The postmaster must have forwarded it from his old place in Cheyenne, though why anyone would send him mail remained a mystery. Inside the torn paper wrapping, Tucker found a stack of letters bound with a fraying ribbon, each envelope addressed to him in delicate handwriting he did not recognize. The paper had yellowed with age, and several envelopes showed water damage and the wear of long travel. He carried them inside to the small kitchen table, poured himself coffee from the pot on the stove, and opened the first letter with careful hands. The date read, April 1874, 5 years ago. His heart began to beat faster as he read the opening lines. Dear Tucker, you do not know me, but I feel as though I know you from the stories my brother Jacob used to tell. He spoke of you often during his time working the cattle drives, and he said you were the finest man he ever rode with, honest and brave and true. I am writing to you because Jacob is gone now, killed in a stampede last month, and before he died, he made me promise to write to you. He said, if anything ever happened to him, you were the one person in this world who might help me. Tucker set the letter down and tried to remember Jacob. The name stirred something in his memory, vague images of a young man with red hair who had ridden beside him during the summer of 1873 on a drive from Texas to Kansas. They had talked some around the campfire, shared whiskey once or twice, but Tucker had moved on after that season and never thought much about the kid again. The guilt settled heavy in his chest as he continued reading. My name is Tessa Langley, and I am 18 years old. I live in a town called Redemption Creek, Kansas, with my aunt and uncle who took me in after our parents died of fever when I was small. Jacob was my only real family, and now that he is gone, my uncle has decided to marry me off to a man named Silas Grayson, who owns the general store here. I do not love this man. He is 43 years old and has buried 2 wives already. I am frightened of him, Tucker. He looks at me in ways that make my skin crawl, and my uncle says I have no choice because he cannot afford to keep feeding me now that Jacob is not sending money home. Tucker felt anger rise in his throat. He had seen too many young women bartered away like livestock during his years in the territories. The practice disgusted him, though he had never been in a position to do anything about it. He read on, his coffee growing cold in the cup. Jacob told me you were different from other men. He said you stood up for a Mexican family once when other cowboys were treating them poorly, and that you gave your wages to a widow whose husband died in a saloon fight so she could get back home to her children. I know it is bold of me to write to you like this, but I have nowhere else to turn. If you could come to Redemption Creek, or if you could send money for a train ticket, I would work for you honestly to repay the debt. I can cook and sew and manage a household. I would be grateful for any employment that would free me from this marriage. Please, if you have any kindness in your heart, help me. I am desperate. The letter was signed simply Tessa Langley, with an address in Redemption Creek. Tucker immediately reached for the second envelope, his hands trembling slightly. This one was dated May 1874. Dear Tucker, I have not heard from you, but I know the mail can be slow and unreliable. My uncle has set the wedding date for June 15th. I am trying to delay it, claiming I need time to grieve my brother properly, but my aunt says I am being foolish and romantic. She says marriage is not about love, but about survival, and that I should be grateful Mr. Grayson is willing to take me at all, considering I have no dowry. I find myself lying awake at night imagining a different life, one where I could choose my own path. Is that foolish? Jacob used to say you talked about owning your own ranch someday, a place where you could raise good horses and live free. That sounds like heaven to me. I dream sometimes that I could see such a place, even just once before I am trapped forever in this town. Please write to me if you receive this. Even a kind word would give me strength. Tucker felt his chest constrict. The desperation in her words reached across the years and grabbed hold of something deep inside him. He tore open the third letter, dated June 1874. Dear Tucker, The wedding has been postponed because Mr. Grayson broke his leg when his wagon overturned. I know it is terrible of me, but I thanked God for this reprieve. The new date is set for August. I have tried to find work in town that might allow me to support myself, but my uncle forbids it. He says it would shame the family for me to work like a common woman when I'm engaged to a respectable businessman. I feel like a prisoner in this house. I watch the wagons pass through town heading west, and I imagine myself on one of them, traveling to places I have only read about in books. Have you ever felt trapped, Tucker? Have you ever wanted to run so badly that your whole body aches with it? I still have not heard from you. Perhaps these letters are not reaching you at all. Perhaps you have moved on from Cheyenne, and my words are disappearing into nothing. But I will keep writing anyway, because it is the only thing that makes me feel less alone. Tucker opened letter after letter, watching as months passed in Tessa's correspondence. The wedding was delayed again when Mr. Grayson's leg became infected. Then it was postponed through the winter because travel was difficult. In her letters, Tessa wrote about her daily life, about books she read borrowed from the minister's small library, about a stray dog she fed in secret, about the sky at sunset and the way the wheat fields looked when the wind moved through them. She wrote about her fears and her hopes. And increasingly, she wrote about Tucker himself. I have built a picture of you in my mind from Jacob's stories, she wrote in a letter dated January 1875. I imagine you as someone strong but gentle, the kind of man who would defend the weak but never use his strength to hurt others. I imagine your voice is deep and steady, the kind of voice that would make a person feel safe. Is that foolish of me, to create a hero out of someone I have never met? Perhaps you are nothing like I imagine. Perhaps you are married yourself by now, with children and a wife who would be angry if she knew some desperate girl was writing to you. But in my darkest moments, thinking of you as I imagine you to be gives me courage to face another day. The later letters grew more resigned. By spring of 1875, Tessa wrote that the wedding was finally scheduled for May and would not be postponed again. Her tone shifted from desperate hope to sad acceptance. I will marry Mr. Grayson in 2 weeks, she wrote in what appeared to be the final letter, dated May 1875. I have accepted this as my fate. Thank you for being my invisible friend these past months, even though you never knew you were filling that role. Writing to you helped me through the darkest time of my life. I like to think that somewhere out there, you are living the life you dreamed of, free and happy on your own land. That thought brings me comfort. I will not write again after this. It would not be proper once I am a married woman. I hope you have a good life, Tucker Morgan. I hope you find someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. Thank you for being my hope, even though you never knew you were. Yours always, Tessa. Tucker sat back in his chair and stared at the pile of letters spread across his table. The sun had moved across the sky while he read, and shadows now stretched long across the floor. His hands were shaking. This woman had reached out to him 5 years ago, had poured her heart into these pages, had trusted him with her desperation and fear, and he had never known. The letters had been sent to an address he had already abandoned, forwarded through a system that had failed them both. By the time they reached him now, she had been married to that man for nearly 5 years. He stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. 5 years was a long time. Tessa would be 23 now, likely with children, her life firmly established in Redemption Creek. What could he possibly do at this point? Riding to Kansas to find her would be madness. She probably did not even remember writing these letters. She had probably made peace with her situation, found some contentment in her life. He would be nothing but a disruption, an unwelcome reminder of youthful desperation. But even as Tucker tried to convince himself of these things, he could not shake the feeling that had settled into his bones while reading her words. Tessa Langley had needed him, and he had not been there. The fact that he had never received her letters did not change the fundamental truth that a young woman had been forced into a marriage she did not want, while he had been drinking and gambling and drifting aimlessly across the territories. Jacob had trusted him enough to tell his sister to reach out in her time of need, and Tucker had failed them both without even knowing it. He paced the small kitchen as darkness fell outside. The responsible thing would be to let it go, to accept that this was ancient history and nothing could be changed now. But Tucker had never been particularly good at doing the responsible thing. He thought about his uncle's ranch, the land he had inherited, the opportunity to finally put down roots like he had always talked about. What was the point of finally having land if he remained the kind of man who turned away from people who needed help? By the time full dark settled over Bonanza, Tucker had made his decision. He would ride to Redemption Creek and find Tessa Langley, not to disrupt her life or cause problems in her marriage, but simply to tell her that he had finally received her letters. She deserved to know that her words had not disappeared into nothing. She deserved to know that someone had heard her, even if it came 5 years too late. He would apologize for not being there when she needed him, and then he would ride back to Colorado and never trouble her again. The next morning, Tucker saddled his best horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Ranger, and packed supplies for the long journey. Redemption Creek was at least 300 miles southeast, through difficult terrain and unpredictable weather. It would take him 2 weeks, maybe more, of hard riding. He left instructions with his nearest neighbor to watch over the ranch, told them he had urgent business in Kansas, and set out before the sun had fully cleared the mountains. The first few days of travel took Tucker across the high plains of eastern Colorado, through grasslands that stretched endlessly under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. He passed wagon trains heading west, families searching for new opportunities in the territories, and he wondered what Tessa's life might have been like if his address had been current when she sent those letters. Could he have helped her? Would she have come to Colorado? The questions circled in his mind like buzzards as the miles passed beneath Ranger's hooves. On the fourth day, Tucker crossed into Kansas and began asking about Redemption Creek at every town and trading post he passed. Most people knew of it, a small farming community about 50 miles east of Dodge City, the kind of place that existed to serve the homesteaders who had claimed land in the area. As he drew closer, Tucker found himself growing nervous. What if Tessa did not want to see him? What if her husband was the jealous type who would cause trouble? He had not thought through the practical implications of showing up unannounced at a married woman's door. It was early September when Tucker finally rode into Redemption Creek, dusty and exhausted from 2 weeks of hard travel. The town was exactly as he had imagined it from Tessa's descriptions. A single main street lined with wooden buildings, fields of wheat visible in every direction. The whole place baking under the relentless Kansas sun. He tied Ranger outside the saloon and went inside to order a whiskey and gather information. The bartender was a talkative man named Pete, who seemed eager for news from Colorado. Tucker obliged him with some stories about silver strikes and cattle prices, then casually asked if he knew of a woman named Tessa Grayson who lived in town. Pete's expression shifted immediately, becoming guarded. "Why you asking about Tessa?" "I knew her brother Jacob some years back," Tucker said carefully. "Promised him I would check on her if I ever passed through this way." The bartender studied him for a long moment, then leaned across the bar and lowered his voice. "Silas Grayson died 3 years ago, fell down his own stairs drunk and broke his neck. Tessa runs the general store now, lives in the apartment above it. But listen here, friend, if you are planning to cause her any trouble, you will have to go through half this town. That woman has been through enough." Tucker felt relief wash through him so powerfully he had to grip the bar to steady himself. She was not married anymore. Whatever life she had built with Grayson, it had ended 3 years ago. "I do not mean her any harm," he said quietly. "I just need to speak with her." Pete pointed down the street. "General store is 3 buildings down on the left. She is usually there this time of day. But I meant what I said. Folks around here are protective of Tessa. She has been good to this town, and we do not take kindly to drifters bothering her." Tucker thanked him and left the saloon, his heart pounding hard in his chest. He stood outside for a moment, gathering his courage, then walked slowly down the street toward the general store. Through the window, he could see a woman behind the counter helping a customer, her back to him. She wore a simple blue dress, and her dark hair was pinned up in a practical style. He waited until the customer left, then pushed open the door. The woman turned at the sound of the bell, and Tucker found himself looking into the face of Tessa Langley for the first time. She was beautiful in a quiet way that had nothing to do with fashion or artifice. Her face showed the marks of hardship, lines around her eyes that spoke of worry and grief, but her expression was open and kind as she smiled at him in welcome. "Good afternoon," she said. "How can I help you?" Tucker removed his hat and tried to find his voice. All the words he had practiced during the long ride from Colorado suddenly seemed inadequate. "Are you Tessa Langley?" Her smile faltered slightly. I am Tessa Grayson now, though my husband passed some time ago. Do I know you?" My name is Tucker Morgan, he said, and watched as the color drained from her face. She gripped the counter with both hands, her eyes going wide with shock. For a long moment neither of them spoke, the silence stretching taut between them. Then Tessa laughed, a short breathless sound that was almost a sob. Tucker Morgan, she repeated, as if testing the name on her tongue. After all these years, I thought you were just a story Jacob made up to comfort me. I only received your letters 2 weeks ago, Tucker said quickly, needing her to understand. They were sent to an address in Cheyenne, but I had already moved on by then. The post office must have held them, and when my uncle died and I inherited his ranch, they forwarded everything to the new address. I came as soon as I read them. I know it is 5 years too late, but I needed you to know that I would have helped you if I had known. I am so sorry I was not there when you needed me. Tessa's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. You wrote all the way from Colorado because of letters I wrote 5 years ago? I could not stand the thought of you believing your words disappeared into nothing, Tucker said. You deserved better than that. She stared at him for a long moment, emotions flickering across her face too quickly for him to read. Then she walked around the counter and stood directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. I married him, she said quietly. 2 weeks after I sent that last letter, I married Silas Grayson. I was his wife for 2 years before he died. I am sorry, Tucker said inadequately. Tessa shook her head. Do not be sorry for his death. He was not a kind man, Tucker. He was exactly what I feared he would be. Cruel when he drank, which was often. Mean-spirited even when he was sober. He never struck me, but only because I learned quickly how to avoid his anger. When he died, I felt nothing but relief, and that makes me a terrible person. It makes you a survivor, Tucker said firmly. Did you have children? No, thank God. I could not have borne bringing a child into that house. She wrapped her arms around herself. Why are you really here, Tucker? It has been 5 years. I am not that desperate girl anymore. I do not need rescuing. He looked at her, this woman who had written to him with such hope and fear, who had survived a marriage she never wanted and come through it with her spirit intact. I do not know, he admitted. Maybe I needed to see that you were all right. Maybe I needed to apologize. Or maybe I just needed to meet the person who wrote those letters. You were so honest in them, Tessa. So brave. I have been thinking about you every day since I read them. She studied his face carefully. What did you expect to find here? I do not know, he said again. What did you expect when you wrote to me 5 years ago? Hope, she answered immediately. A chance at a different life, freedom. She laughed sadly. Foolish dreams from a foolish girl. Not foolish, Tucker said. You deserved all of those things. You still do. Tessa turned away from him and walked to the window, staring out at the street. I have a life here now. I own this store outright. Silas left me nothing but debts, but I worked hard and paid them all off. People in this town respect me. I have friends, a home, stability. It is not the life I dreamed of when I was 18, but it is mine. I am not trying to take anything from you, Tucker said. I just wanted you to know that someone heard you, that you mattered to someone, even if it came too late to change anything. She turned back to him, and this time she was smiling, though tears still shone in her eyes. You rode 300 miles just to tell me that? Yes. That is possibly the most ridiculous and wonderful thing anyone has ever done for me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Where are you staying? I have not arranged anything yet, just rode into town an hour ago. There is a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Henderson runs it. Tell her I sent you, and she will give you a fair rate. Tessa hesitated. How long are you planning to stay? Tucker had not thought that far ahead. I do not know. A few days, maybe? I should get back to my ranch soon. The work never stops. So you got your dream, Tessa said softly. Your own land. Inherited it from my uncle 6 months ago. It is not much yet, just a small spread in Bonanza, Colorado. But it is mine. He found himself wanting to tell her everything, to describe the mountains and the clear streams, and the way the sunset painted the peaks gold. You would like it there. It is beautiful in a way that makes you believe good things are possible. Maybe I will see it someday, she said, but her tone suggested she did not really believe it. Tucker nodded and turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Would you have dinner with me tonight? I would like to hear about your life, if you are willing to share it, and I can tell you stories about your brother. I remember more than I thought I did." Tessa bit her lip, clearly torn. "People will talk if they see us together. Let them talk. What harm can dinner do?" After a long moment, she nodded. "All right. The restaurant next to the hotel serves decent food. Meet me there at 6 o'clock." Tucker spent the afternoon settling into the boarding house and caring for Ranger, but his mind was entirely occupied with thoughts of the evening ahead. He cleaned up as best he could, shaving carefully and putting on his only good shirt. When 6 o'clock arrived, he walked to the restaurant with his stomach full of nervous energy. Tessa was already there, seated at a corner table. She had changed into a green dress that brought out the color in her eyes, and she had let her hair down so it fell in dark waves around her shoulders. Tucker's breath caught in his chest at the sight of her. "You look beautiful," he said as he sat down across from her. She blushed, the color rising in her cheeks. "You do not have to say things like that. I am only saying what is true." They ordered food, and for a while they made awkward small talk about the weather and the price of grain. But gradually, as the evening wore on, the conversation deepened. Tucker told her stories about Jacob, about the cattle drive, and the young man's enthusiasm and good humor. Tessa listened with tears in her eyes, grateful for these memories of her brother. In turn, she told Tucker about her life with Silas, the loneliness of that marriage, and the freedom she had found after his death. She spoke about building up the general store, earning the trust of the community, creating a life that was entirely her own. Tucker listened, fascinated by her strength and resilience. "I thought about you sometimes over the years," Tessa admitted as they lingered over coffee. "Wondered if you had ever gotten my letters, if you had thought about helping me and decided it was not worth the trouble. It hurt to think you might have ignored me, but it hurt worse to think my words had just vanished into nothing." "They did not vanish," Tucker said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "They found me. Maybe they came 5 years late, but they found me." She did not pull her hand away. "What happens now?" "I do not know," Tucker said honestly. "I came here to give you closure, to apologize. I did not think beyond that." "Maybe you should stay a few more days," Tessa said quietly. "Get to know me as I am now, not just as the desperate girl who wrote those letters." "I would like that," Tucker said, his heart lifting. "I would like that very much." Over the next week, Tucker found excuses to extend his stay in Redemption Creek. He helped Tessa with repairs around the general store, fixing a leaking roof and replacing some rotted floorboards in the storage room. He took her on rides out into the countryside, showing her the same stars he had seen from different locations across the West. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering shared interests and compatible temperaments. Tucker learned that Tessa loved reading and had educated herself through borrowed books. She learned that he had a gift with horses and a quiet strength that needed no loud proclamation. He discovered she had a wry sense of humor that surfaced once she felt comfortable. She discovered he was exactly the kind of man Jacob had described, honest and steady and true. The town watched their courtship with interest, and to Tucker's relief, general approval. Tessa had earned enough goodwill that people wanted to see her happy. The bartender, Pete, nodded approvingly when Tucker passed. Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house began packing him extra food for his outings with Tessa. But as the days passed, Tucker knew he could not delay the inevitable forever. He had a ranch in Colorado that needed attention, responsibilities he could not ignore indefinitely. 2 weeks after arriving in Redemption Creek, he sat with Tessa on the porch of the general store and broached the subject he had been avoiding. "I need to head back to Colorado soon," he said, hating the words even as he spoke them. "The ranch cannot run itself, and I have already been gone too long." Tessa nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "I understand. You have your own life to get back to." "Come with me," Tucker said suddenly, the words bursting out before he could overthink them. "Come to Colorado. See the ranch. See if you could build a life there." She looked at him with startled eyes. "Tucker, I cannot just abandon everything I have built here. I am not asking you to abandon anything. I am asking you to consider something different." He took her hands in his. "These past 2 weeks have been the happiest I can remember. I wake up excited to see you. I go to sleep thinking about our conversations. You make me want to be better than I am. Is that not worth exploring?" "We barely know each other," Tessa protested, but her voice was weak. "I know you well enough to know that I could fall in love with you very easily," Tucker said. "Maybe I already have. Tell me you do not feel something between us." She pulled her hands away and stood, pacing the porch. "Of course I feel something, but feelings are not enough. What are you really asking me? To sell my store and move to a ranch in Colorado on the hope that this attraction between us might turn into something lasting?" "I am asking you to take a chance," Tucker said. "The same kind of chance you were willing to take 5 years ago when you wrote those letters. You wanted freedom then, a chance to choose your own path. I am offering you that chance now." "It is not the same," Tessa said, but she sounded uncertain. "Why not? Because you are older? Because you have built a life here? Those are reasons to stay, I understand that. But are they reasons to be happy? Do you wake up every morning excited about the day ahead? Or are you just going through the motions of a safe, predictable life?" The words hit home. Tucker could see it in the way Tessa's expression crumbled, the way she wrapped her arms around herself protectively. "That is not fair," she whispered. "Maybe not, but it is true, is it not?" He stood and moved to her side. "I am not saying you have to decide right now. Come to Colorado for a visit. Stay a month. See the ranch. See if you could imagine a life there. If you decide it is not for you, I will bring you back to Redemption Creek myself, and we will part as friends. But give us a chance, Tessa. Give yourself a chance at the life you dreamed of." She looked up at him, and Tucker saw the war playing out behind her eyes. Fear and hope, practicality and desire, all battling for dominance. Finally, she spoke in a voice so quiet he had to lean in to hear. "I am afraid. I was married to a man I did not choose, and it nearly destroyed me. What if I choose wrong again?" "What if you choose right?" Tucker countered. He cupped her face gently in his hands. "I cannot promise you everything will be perfect. I cannot promise we will not have hard times. But I can promise I will respect you, listen to you, and value your dreams as much as my own. I can promise I will never make you feel trapped or afraid, and I can promise that I will do everything in my power to make you happy." Tears spilled down Tessa's cheeks. "You are asking me to be very brave." "You already are very brave. I am just asking you to be brave one more time." She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. "All right. I will come to Colorado with you. For a visit, to see if this is real or just a beautiful dream that will fade in the morning light." Tucker kissed her then, soft and careful, a promise sealed with touch. When they pulled apart, both were trembling. "When do we leave?" Tessa asked. "As soon as you can arrange things here, sell the store if you want, or hire someone to run it while you're gone. Whatever you need to do." Over the next week, Tessa made arrangements with incredible efficiency. She found a young widow named Mary Thornton, who was willing to manage the general store in exchange for room and board in the apartment above. She settled her accounts and packed her belongings. The town threw her a small farewell gathering, and Tucker was touched by how many people came to wish Tessa well. "You come back if things do not work out," Mrs. Henderson told her firmly. "You will always have a place here." "Take care of her," Pete the bartender told Tucker with a meaningful look. "Or you will answer to all of us." Finally, in late September of 1879, Tucker and Tessa set out from Redemption Creek on the long journey to Colorado. They traveled slowly, with Tessa riding a gentle mare Tucker had purchased from a local farmer. The weather was perfect, warm days and cool nights, the landscape changing gradually as they moved west from the flat Kansas plains into the rolling hills that presaged the mountains. They talked constantly as they rode, sharing histories and dreams, learning each other's rhythms and habits. Tucker told her about his years drifting, the loneliness of that life, and the relief he felt at finally having a place to call home. Tessa told him about growing up under her aunt and uncle's roof, always feeling like a burden, always trying to make herself smaller and quieter so as not to cause trouble. "I want to take up space," she said one evening as they camped under the stars. "I want to laugh loudly and have opinions and not apologize for existing. Is that terrible?" "That is wonderful," Tucker said, pulling her close. "You should take up all the space you want." They crossed into Colorado in early October, and Tessa gasped at her first sight of the Rocky Mountains, rising purple and magnificent against the western sky. Tucker watched her face light up with wonder and felt his heart swell with love. He had been holding back from saying the words, wanting to give her time and space, but seeing her joy at the landscape he loved made him want to shout his feelings from the mountaintops. When they finally rode into Bonanza, the aspens were turning gold, and the air had the sharp clarity that came with altitude. Tucker led Tessa up the winding path to his ranch, nervous suddenly about what she would think. The house was small, little more than a cabin really, and the outbuildings needed work, but the land was beautiful, rolling meadows backed by forest with mountains visible in every direction. Tessa dismounted and stood silent for a long moment, taking it all in. Tucker held his breath, waiting for her verdict. "It is perfect," she finally said, turning to him with shining eyes. "Tucker, it is absolutely perfect." Relief flooded through him. "Really? Because I know the house is small, and there is a lot of work to do, and the winters here are hard." "It is perfect," she repeated firmly. "I can see it, Tucker. I can see the life we could build here. Gardens in the summer, horses in those meadows, children running between the house and the barn." She stopped abruptly, blushing. "I am sorry. I am getting ahead of myself." "Do not apologize," Tucker said, moving to stand beside her. "I see the same things. I have been seeing them since the day I read your letters." They stood together, looking out over the land as the sun set behind the mountains, painting everything gold and rose and purple. Tucker put his arm around Tessa's shoulders, and she leaned into him, fitting against his side as if she had always belonged there. Over the following weeks, Tessa settled into life on the ranch with an ease that surprised them both. She proved to be an excellent cook and a tireless worker, tackling the neglected house with determination and transforming it into a real home. She planted a late garden, putting in cold-weather vegetables and herbs. She befriended the neighbor women and made plans for a chicken coop in the spring. Tucker watched her bloom in the mountain air, becoming more confident and outspoken with each passing day. She laughed more freely, sang while she worked, offered opinions on ranch decisions without apologizing. This was the woman she was meant to be, Tucker realized. The woman she would have become years ago if life had been kinder. But despite their growing closeness and the obvious rightness of their partnership, Tucker was careful not to push for more than Tessa was ready to give. They slept in separate rooms, maintained a respectful physical distance even as their emotional intimacy deepened. He had promised her a choice, and he would not pressure her into anything before she was ready. It was Tessa who finally broke the careful boundaries they had established. In mid-November, with the first snow beginning to fall, she came to him in the barn where he was settling the horses for the night. "Tucker, can we talk?" He set down the hay fork and gave her his full attention. "Of course. What is on your mind?" She twisted her hands together nervously. "I have been here almost 2 months now. I have seen the ranch through changing seasons. I have met your neighbors and been to town and experienced what life would be like here, and I have made a decision." Tucker's heart began to pound. "All right. I do not want to go back to Kansas," Tessa said firmly. "I want to stay here, with you, if you will have me." Joy exploded in Tucker's chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Are you sure? This is not just because you have come all this way, or because you feel obligated?" "I am sure," she said, stepping closer. "I love you, Tucker Morgan. I have loved you since I was 18 years old and writing letters to a man I had never met. And I love you even more now that I know you in reality. You are everything I imagined and so much more. You are kind and patient, and you make me feel safe in a way I never have before. I want to build a life with you here. I want to marry you, if you want that too." Tucker closed the distance between them and took her face in his hands. "I love you too, Tessa. I have loved you since I read your first letter and felt your courage and your hope. I want to marry you more than anything in this world." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, pouring all his love and desire and gratitude into the touch. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "When?" Tessa asked. "As soon as we can arrange it, tomorrow if possible." She laughed, the sound full of joy. "Maybe give me a few days to make a dress at least, and we should invite the neighbors, but soon, Tucker, very soon." They were married 3 weeks later in early December, in the small church in Bonanza, with a dozen neighbors as witnesses. Tessa wore a dress she had sewn herself from blue fabric Tucker had bought her in town, and she carried wildflowers that somehow still bloomed in a sheltered corner of the garden. Tucker wore his best suit and could not stop smiling the entire day. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Tucker kissed his bride, he felt something settle deep in his chest that had been restless his entire life. This was home. This woman was home. Everything that had come before, all the drifting and searching and loneliness, had been leading him to this moment. The neighbors threw them a celebration at the ranch, bringing food and music and genuine warmth. As Tucker danced with his wife under lantern light in their small house, Tessa whispered in his ear, "Thank you for coming to find me. Thank you for being brave enough to ride all that way because of some old letters." "Thank you for taking a chance on me," Tucker replied. "Thank you for being brave enough to start over." "We are both brave," Tessa said with a smile. "We make a good team." Their first winter together was hard but joyful. The snows came deep and the temperatures plummeted, trapping them in the house for days at a time. But Tucker had prepared well with supplies, and they passed the long evenings reading aloud to each other, making plans for the spring, and learning each other in the intimate ways of married people. Tessa proved to be as passionate as she was practical, bringing warmth and laughter to Tucker's bed that he had never experienced before. She was curious and bold, unafraid to express her desires, and Tucker loved that she trusted him enough to be vulnerable in that way. Their lovemaking was tender and fierce by turns, a physical expression of the emotional bond that grew stronger with each passing day. As spring arrived and the snow melted, they began the work of truly building their ranch. Tucker purchased more horses, beginning the breeding program he had always dreamed of. Tessa expanded her garden significantly, planting vegetables and flowers, creating beauty alongside utility. They built the chicken coop together, laughing as they argued good-naturedly about the best design. Word spread through the valley about Tucker's skill with horses, and people began bringing him animals to train. Tessa suggested they also offer boarding for travelers' horses, and soon they had built a small but steady business. The ranch began to prosper in a modest way, nothing grand but enough to be comfortable. In late summer, Tessa realized she was pregnant. She told Tucker on a warm August evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and he lifted her off her feet with joy, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Tessa asked, though she could clearly see that he was. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Tucker said, kneeling before her and placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "You have given me everything I ever wanted, Tessa. A home, a partnership, and now a child. I do not know what I did to deserve this, but I swear I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of it." The pregnancy was not easy. Tessa suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and Tucker hovered anxiously, doing everything he could to make her comfortable. As she grew larger, the altitude made her breathless, and she had to rest frequently. But she remained cheerful through it all, talking to the baby constantly and making plans for the future. Their son was born in March of 1881, a difficult labor that lasted 2 days and left Tessa exhausted but triumphant. Tucker held his son for the first time with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the tiny perfect features and the weight of responsibility that came with fatherhood. "What should we name him?" Tessa asked from the bed, her voice hoarse from exertion. "What about Jacob?" Tucker suggested quietly. "After your brother." Tears filled Tessa's eyes, and she nodded. "Jacob Tucker Morgan. It is perfect." Parenthood transformed them both in unexpected ways. Tucker discovered reserves of patience he had not known he possessed, walking the floor with a crying baby at midnight, changing diapers without complaint, doing whatever was needed to support Tessa as she recovered. Tessa proved to be a natural mother, confident and calm, even when the baby was fussy or the situation was stressful. As young Jacob grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Tucker's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and they began getting customers from as far away as Denver. Tessa started selling her preserves and baked goods in town, adding to their income. They hired a young man to help with the ranch work, giving them more time to focus on their growing family. When Jacob was 2 years old, Tessa became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1884, they welcomed a daughter they named Grace. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's steady temperament, and Jacob was instantly devoted to his baby sister. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by the everyday joys and challenges of family life. There were hard times, certainly. A bad winter when they lost several horses to disease. A fire in the barn that required extensive rebuilding. Tessa's aunt passing away in Kansas, requiring a journey back for the funeral, where Tessa had to face her uncle and the life she had left behind. But through it all, Tucker and Tessa remained partners in the truest sense. They made decisions together, supported each other through difficulties, and never let the daily grind of ranch life dull the love they shared. They still made time for evening walks together, for reading aloud by the fire, for stolen kisses in the barn. On a summer evening in 1889, 10 years after Tucker had first ridden into Redemption Creek, he and Tessa sat on their porch watching Jacob and Grace play in the yard. Another baby, a son they had named Samuel, slept peacefully in Tessa's arms. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and beautiful, everything they had dreamed of, and more. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if I had gotten those letters on time?" Tucker asked, a question that still surfaced occasionally. Tessa considered it seriously, as she always did. "I think about it sometimes. If you had come to Kansas in 1874, I would have been so young, so desperate. I would have clung to you as a rescuer, not chosen you as a partner. Maybe things would have worked out, but maybe I needed those years to become the woman who could build this life with you." "You think it happened the way it was supposed to?" Tucker asked. "I think we made the best of what happened," Tessa said. "You could have thrown those letters away when you finally got them. You could have decided 5 years was too long and I was not worth the trouble, but you did not. You rode across the country to find me, even though you had no idea what you would find. That took courage and kindness and hope. Those are the qualities that made everything else possible." Tucker reached over and took her free hand in his. "I love you, Tessa Morgan, more every day." "I love you too," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for finding me." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Tucker felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. He had found his home, not just in the land, but in the woman beside him. The letters had come late, but they had come, and that had made all the difference. Years continued to pass, each one adding depth and history to the Morgan Ranch. Jacob grew into a serious boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Grace proved to have her mother's head for business and started helping with the accounts as soon as she could write. Samuel was the adventurous one, always climbing trees and exploring the woods, giving his parents heart palpitations with his fearlessness. In 1893, Bonanza experienced a boom when silver was discovered in the nearby mountains. The town tripled in size almost overnight, and suddenly the Morgan Ranch was in a prime location. Tucker and Tessa expanded their operations, hiring more help and building additional stables to accommodate the increased demand for horses. But success did not change them fundamentally. They remained grounded in the values that had brought them together: honesty, hard work, and devotion to each other. They taught their children those same values, insisting on integrity even when shortcuts might have been profitable. Jacob, at 15, asked his father one evening why they did not charge more for their services when they easily could. Tucker had taken him out to the barn and showed him a mare he was training for a widow in town. "Mrs. Peterson cannot afford to pay us what this training is really worth," Tucker explained. "But her husband died last year and left her with 3 children and a farm to run. That mare is her best chance at plowing the fields and bringing in a harvest. So we charge her what she can afford, not what we could get, because being a good neighbor matters more than being rich." "But we have a family too," Jacob protested. We have to think of our own interests first?" "We have enough," Tucker said firmly. "Your mother and I started with nothing and built all of this. We have food on the table, a roof over our heads, and the ability to make choices. That is wealth, son. Real wealth is not about hoarding everything you can get. It is about having enough to share with others who need help." Jacob absorbed this lesson, and Tucker saw it reflected in his son's actions as he grew older. Grace and Samuel learned it too, each in their own way. The Morgan children became known in the valley as hardworking and fair-minded, a credit to their parents. In 1897, when Tessa was 41 years old, they discovered she was pregnant again. It was a surprise, as they had assumed their family was complete with 3 children, but Tessa took the news with her characteristic practicality and good humor. "Well," she said to Tucker with a wry smile, "I suppose the universe decided we needed one more adventure." Their 4th child, a daughter they named Rose, was born in early 1898. She was a calm, contented baby who seemed to fit seamlessly into the busy household. Jacob, now a young man of 17, was protective of his youngest sister. Grace, at 14, enjoyed having another girl in the family. And Samuel, at 12, was just happy to have someone younger than him to boss around. That same year, Tucker turned 45 and decided it was time to bring Jacob more fully into the ranch operations. He began teaching his son everything he knew about horse breeding and training, about managing land and resources, about treating employees fairly. Jacob proved an apt student, asking thoughtful questions and demonstrating good instincts. "He will be better at this than I ever was," Tucker told Tessa proudly one evening. "He learned from the best," Tessa replied. "You built something real here, Tucker, something that will last beyond us." As the century turned and 1900 arrived, the Morgan family celebrated with their neighbors at a big community gathering in Bonanza. Tucker, now in his late 40s, looked around at the town that had grown up around them. So much had changed since that day 20 years ago, when he had received Tessa's letters. The wild frontier was becoming more civilized, with railroads and telegraph lines connecting previously isolated communities. But some things remained constant. The mountains still rose majestic and unchanging to the west. The stars still wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns. And the love between Tucker and Tessa still burned as strong as ever, deepened and enriched by 2 decades of shared life. In 1902, Jacob married a young woman named Emma Franklin, whose family had moved to the valley 3 years prior. The wedding was held at the ranch, with the whole community invited. As Tucker walked his son's bride down the aisle, having been asked to stand in for her deceased father, he remembered his own wedding day 23 years earlier. "You are getting a good man," he whispered to Emma before handing her over to Jacob. "And you are joining a family that will always have your back." Jacob and Emma built a house on the far side of the Morgan property, and soon they announced they were expecting their first child. Tucker and Tessa were delighted at the prospect of becoming grandparents. Their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas, was born in 1903. Holding his grandson for the first time, Tucker felt the circle of life complete itself in a profound way. He thought of Tessa's letters, of that desperate plea from a frightened girl he had never met. From that moment of need and response had grown this entire family, these lives that would extend into the future. "What are you thinking about?" Tessa asked, watching him cradle the baby with such tenderness. "I am thinking about how one decision can change everything," Tucker said. "How choosing to respond to those letters set everything else in motion." "You made the right choice," Tessa said softly. "We both did," Tucker corrected. "You chose to take a chance on me. That was just as brave." As the years continued to unfold, the Morgan Ranch remained a constant in the changing landscape of Colorado. Grace eventually married a doctor from Denver and moved to the city, but she visited often and maintained close ties with the family. Samuel developed a passion for engineering and went to study in the East, though he too always returned to the ranch for important occasions. Rose, the youngest, proved to have a gift with animals that surpassed even her father's. As she grew into her teens, people began bringing her horses that other trainers had given up on. She had a patience and intuition that seemed almost magical, able to connect with even the most traumatized creatures. "She has your heart," Tucker told Tessa one day, as they watched 15-year-old Rose working with a skittish stallion that had been abused by previous owners. That ability to see past the damage to the real individual underneath. "She has your steadiness," Tessa replied, "that quality that makes others feel safe enough to heal." In 1910, Tucker and Tessa celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a surprise party, inviting friends and neighbors from throughout the valley. As Tucker stood to make a toast, looking out at the crowd of people whose lives had intersected with theirs over the decades, he felt overwhelming gratitude. "Most of you know the story of how Tessa and I met," he began. "How I received letters from her 5 years after she sent them, and rode across the country to find her. People said I was crazy, that I was chasing a ghost from the past. But I want to tell you all something. Those letters may have been 5 years old, but the person who wrote them was timeless. Her courage, her hope, her refusal to accept a life that diminished her. Those qualities were as real and vital the day I met her as they had been when she first put pen to paper." He turned to Tessa, who had tears in her eyes. "You have been my partner, my best friend, my greatest adventure. Everything good in my life traces back to the day I decided to ride to Kansas and find you. Thank you for taking a chance on a drifter with a small ranch and big dreams. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for being exactly who you are." The crowd applauded as Tucker kissed his wife, and Tessa whispered in his ear, "Thank you for being the man Jacob always said you were. Thank you for proving that hope is not foolish, and that sometimes the right person is worth waiting for, even if they arrive late." The party went late into the night, full of music and dancing and laughter. Tucker and Tessa's grandchildren ran underfoot, being spoiled by doting relatives. Jacob and Emma, now parents of 3, managed the ranch alongside Tucker. Grace's husband spoke about medical advances in Denver. Samuel shared stories of building bridges in the East. Rose held court in the barn, showing off her latest rescue horse to admiring guests. Looking at it all, Tucker marveled at how one act of courage, one decision to respond to old letters from a stranger, had created this beautiful, complicated, loving family. The Wild West of his youth was fading into memory, replaced by a more settled civilization. But the values that had sustained him in Tessa, honesty and hard work and love, those remained as vital as ever. As an older couple now, Tucker approaching 60 and Tessa 54, they began to slow down. Tucker let Jacob take over more of the day-to-day ranch operations, though he still worked with the horses he loved. Tessa reduced her workload as well, spending more time with her grandchildren and pursuing hobbies she had never had time for before. She started painting the mountain landscapes she loved, discovering a talent she had not known she possessed. But they still made time for each other, walking together each evening when weather permitted, talking about everything and nothing. The physical passion of their early years had mellowed into a deeper intimacy, built on decades of shared experience and unwavering commitment. On a summer evening in 1914, they took their usual walk up to a high meadow that offered views of the entire valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Tucker spread a blanket on the ground, and they sat together, Tessa leaning against his chest, his arms wrapped around her. "Do you have any regrets?" Tucker asked, a question he had never quite dared to voice before. Tessa was quiet for a long moment, considering seriously. "I regret the years I spent trapped in a marriage I did not choose. I regret that Jacob died before he could see me happy. I regret that my relationship with my aunt and uncle never healed before they passed. But do I regret coming to Colorado with you? Do I regret building this life? Not for one single second. I regret that I was not there when you first needed me," Tucker admitted. "I know it worked out in the end, but I still wish I could have spared you those years with Grayson." "If you had been there then, we would have been different people," Tessa said. "I was so young, Tucker, so scared and desperate. I needed those hard years to become strong enough to be your equal partner, and you needed your years of drifting to become the man who would ride across the country for a stranger. We met when we were ready to meet." "You are very wise," Tucker said, kissing the top of her head. "I have had a good teacher," Tessa replied. "You have taught me so much about courage and integrity, about choosing love even when it is difficult, about building something lasting." They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. Tucker thought about all the miles he had traveled in his life, all the places he had seen and left behind. None of it compared to this, to sitting on a mountain meadow with the woman he loved, surrounded by the life they had built together. In 1918, the world was forever changed by the Great War raging in Europe. Samuel enlisted despite his parents' fears, driven by a sense of duty and adventure. The months he was overseas were the longest and most anxious of Tucker and Tessa's lives. They wrote to him constantly, sent packages, and prayed for his safe return. When Samuel finally came home in 1919, he was changed, haunted by things he could not speak about. But slowly, with the help of his family and the healing power of the mountain landscape, he began to recover. He threw himself into helping with the ranch, finding solace in physical labor and the rhythms of nature. Rose, now 21, had become the valley's premier horse trainer, surpassing even her father's reputation. She had people bringing her animals from all over Colorado and neighboring states. She was also beautiful and kind, attracting numerous suitors, but she seemed in no hurry to marry. "I want to be sure," she told her mother when Tessa gently raised the subject. "I want what you and father have. I would rather be alone than settle for less." "That is very wise," Tessa said, thinking of her own first marriage and how different her life might have been if she had been given the choice to wait. The right person is worth waiting for. In 1920, Rose met a veterinarian named Henry Crawford who had moved to Colorado from California. They connected immediately over their shared love of animals, and Tucker and Tessa watched their courtship with pleasure. Henry was a good man, patient and kind, with a deep respect for Rose's independence and skills. They married in the spring of 1921, adding another branch to the Morgan family tree. As the 1920s progressed and America changed around them, the Morgan Ranch remained a steady presence. Tucker, now in his late 60s, had officially retired from active ranch work, though he could still be found in the barn most days, gentling young horses or advising his son and grandsons. Tessa, approaching 65, spent her time painting, gardening, and being grandmother to a growing brood of grandchildren and now great-grandchildren. They had built something lasting, something that would endure beyond their own lives. The values they had instilled in their children had been passed down to the next generation. The land they had worked was prosperous and well-managed. The community they had helped build was strong and supportive. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1920, their children organized another celebration. But this one was more intimate, just the immediate family gathered at the ranch. After dinner, Jacob stood to make a toast. "Mother, Father, you have shown us what a real partnership looks like. You have demonstrated that love is not just a feeling, but a choice made every single day. You have built a legacy that extends far beyond this ranch. Every time I treat someone fairly, I am honoring what you taught me. Every time Grace stands up for herself, she is channeling your courage. Every time Samuel serves his community, he is following your example. And every time Rose connects with an animal others have given up on, she is living your lesson that every creature deserves compassion and a second chance." He raised his glass. "To Tucker and Tessa Morgan, the foundation of everything good in our lives. May your love continue to inspire us all." Tucker held Tessa's hand as the toast concluded, feeling her squeeze his fingers gently. 40 years. It seemed impossible that so much time had passed, yet also like no time at all. He could still remember the day he first saw her in the general store in Redemption Creek, the shock of recognition he had felt even though they had never met before. He could remember their first kiss, their wedding day, the births of their children, all of it as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "Do you remember that first dinner we had in Kansas?" Tucker asked later as they prepared for bed. "When I asked you what happened now?" "I remember," Tessa said, brushing out her hair, now more silver than dark. "You said you did not know what came next." "I still do not know what comes next," Tucker admitted, "but I know I want to face it with you." "We are getting old, Tucker," Tessa said, turning to face him. "Our bodies are slowing down. We will not have many more years. However many we have left, I will treasure everyone," Tucker said. "You gave me the greatest gift of my life, Tessa. You gave me a purpose, a family, a home. You made me better than I would have been alone." "We made each other better," Tessa corrected, coming to sit beside him. "That is what real love does. It lifts both people higher." They held each other close, two people who had found each other across distance and time, who had built a life of meaning and purpose together. The letters that had brought them together, those yellowed pages with their desperate pleas and tentative hopes, were stored safely in a box in their bedroom. Sometimes Tessa would take them out and read them, marveling at how young and frightened she had sounded. "That girl saved my life," she told Tucker once. "By being brave enough to reach out, by refusing to accept a future she did not want, she set everything good in motion. I owe her everything." "She was remarkable," Tucker agreed, "just like the woman she became." The years continued their steady march. Tucker and Tessa moved into their 70s, slowing down but still active, still engaged with their family and community. They took pleasure in simple things, morning coffee on the porch, evening walks when Tucker's knees permitted, visits from children and grandchildren, the changing seasons on the land they loved. In 1928, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, a remarkable milestone. The whole family gathered, along with friends from throughout the valley. Tucker, now 75 years old, with white hair and a weathered face that showed every year he had spent outdoors, stood to address the crowd. 50 years ago, I married the woman who had written to me for help 5 years before I received her letters. People thought I was crazy then. Some probably still do. But I want to tell you all something I have learned in these 50 years. Love is not about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. Love is about showing up. It is about choosing someone and then choosing them again every single day. It is about building something together that is bigger than either of you alone. He looked at Tessa, his partner for half a century, and saw the same woman he had fallen in love with in Kansas all those years ago, just with more wisdom and grace etched into her features. Tessa, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking that chance. Thank you for 50 years of partnership. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. I would, Tessa said with a mischievous smile. I would send those letters to the right address the first time and save us both 5 years. The crowd laughed and Tucker grinned. Maybe, or maybe everything happened exactly as it needed to. Maybe, Tessa agreed. Either way, I am grateful for the life we built together. You were worth waiting for, Tucker Morgan. You were worth every difficult year, every moment of fear and uncertainty. Because when I finally found you, or you found me, it was exactly right. They kissed to applause from their family and friends, and the party continued long into the night. Tucker and Tessa danced together, moving slowly to music, played by their grandchildren, surrounded by the legacy of their love. As they grew older still, into their 80s, Tucker and Tessa spent more time simply being together. They sat on the porch for hours, watching the changing light on the mountains, not needing to fill the silence with words. They had said everything that needed saying over the decades. Now, it was enough just to be present with each other. Tucker passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1935, at the age of 82. He had lived a long, full life, had seen his children and grandchildren prosper, had built something lasting. His last words to Tessa, spoken the evening before he died, were simple. Thank you for being my home. Tessa grieved deeply, but not bitterly. She had been blessed with 56 years of marriage to a man who had loved her completely. She lived another 3 years, spending her time painting and telling stories to her great-grandchildren about the wild west of her youth, about a cowboy who had ridden across the country to find her, about a love that had transformed both their lives. When Tessa passed away in her sleep in 1938 at the age of 82, her children found her with a peaceful smile on her face. In her hands, she clutched a stack of old yellowed letters, the ones she had written so desperately more than 60 years before to a man she had never met, never knowing that those words would eventually find him and bring him across the country to save her. The letters that had seemed to disappear into nothing had actually traveled through time to exactly where they needed to be, arriving late, but arriving nonetheless. They had sparked a journey that created a family, built a legacy, and proved that hope is never wasted, even when it seems like all is lost. The ranch continued under Jacob's management and eventually passed to his children and then to theirs. The Morgan family remained a fixture in the valley for generations, known for their integrity and their skill with horses. And in the family stories passed down through the years, the tale of Tucker and Tessa's courtship remained a favorite, a reminder that true love is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, and worth any distance that must be traveled to find it. The old house where Tucker and Tessa had built their life together remained standing into the 21st century, carefully maintained by their descendants as a connection to their family's history. In the bedroom where they had spent so many years together, framed and preserved under glass, hung the letters that had started everything. Visitors would read those desperate, hopeful words written by an 18-year-old girl in 1874 and marvel at the courage it took to reach out to a stranger, at the kindness of the man who responded 5 years too late, and at the love that grew from that unlikely beginning. It was a story of the Wild West, but more than that, it was a story of the human heart and its infinite capacity for courage, for hope, and for love that transcends time and distance to find exactly where it belongs. Tucker and Tessa Morgan had found each other across the miles and years, and in doing so, they had created something beautiful and lasting that would endure far beyond their own lifetimes, a testament to the power of choosing love, even when all the circumstances suggest it is impossible. Their story proved that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with a dramatic moment, but with a simple choice to respond to someone who needs help, to take a chance on an uncertain future, to believe that love is worth the risk. And in the end, that is what made their story worth telling and retelling through the generations. Not the dramatic journey or the romantic circumstances, but the everyday heroism of two people choosing each other, again and again, for 56 years until death finally parted them.